ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पद आनशृण्वन्नोतिभिस्सीदसादनम् ॐ श्री सद्गुरु महागणाधिपतये नमः। वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गजाननपद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानां एकदन्तं वास्महे। कल्याणाद्भुतगात्राजगामिदार्थप्रदायिने श्रीमद्वेङ्कटनिवासाय श्रीनिवासाय मङ्गलम्। गुरुब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। सद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी। विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। सर्वमङ्गलमाङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थसाधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणि नमोऽस्तुते। नमो व्रातपतये नमो गणपतये नमः प्रमदपतये नमस्तेऽस्तु लम्बोदराय एकदन्ताय विघ्नविनाशिने त्रिपुराय श्रीवरदमूर्तये नमो नमः। वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटिसमप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा विनाशकादि समस्तहरिहरदेवताभ्यो नमो नमः। सर्व अपराधक्षमार्थं सर्वमङ्गलप्राप्त्यर्थम् अलङ्कार पञ्चमुखदीपं दृढयामि आचमनीयं समर्पयामि दिव्यरक्षां धारयामि इन्द्रस्तोमेन पञ्चदशेन मध्यमिदं वातेन सकरेण रक्षां धारयामि। ॐ हर ॐ। ओके सर।
Namaste. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Aswati Garu, are you there? Aswati Garu, yes. Hi. Let me just take a couple of minutes to introduce. Namaste, everyone. And we are so fortunate and so blessed to have Aswati Garu today with us. And it has almost taken 3 months to get Aswati Garu to this podium. If it was not for COVID, Aswati Garu would have been here around this time in Temple, Texas, with Swami Bodhananda and a few others. I had a few ideas of doing a workshop or a lecture series with Aswati Garu here in our Hindu Temple, Texas. So I'll just say a few words for those who have not heard of Aswati Garu. Sri Aswat, everyone dearly calls Aswati Garu as Aswati Garu or Aswat Ji, is a retired system analyst from Franklin County Board of Development Disabilities in Columbus, Ohio. So Franklin County Board of Development Disabilities, so a system analyst in Ohio. He had just retired, I think, last year. And Aswati Garu has an academic background in physics, mathematics, law, and computer sciences. He's a Vedic scholar and had training, formal training in Sanskrit from his grandfather, Sri M.S.S. Shastri, Vidwan of Mysore Court. He also had received formal training in Vedas for 9 years from Acharya of Yajurveda, Professor Ananta Krishna of Bangalore Sanskrit College. Aswati Garu has been teaching Vedas, Vedic chanting, and Vedanta to several students since 1995 in US. So quarter century, more than quarter century. And he continues to teach Sanskrit language, scriptures of India in several weekly evening sessions to different groups in Columbus, Ohio, now which has become pretty much national, and it probably could be even international during COVID time and with advanced technology. Wednesdays, Ashwati Garu teaches Bhagavad Gita. And once a month, Ashwati Garu takes up Upanishads. And Ashwati Garu also teaches Vedanta and Vedic chanting. And those of you who are interested at the end of this talk either can ask questions directly or contact me. And Ashwati Garu has conducted many seminars on Indian scriptures in US, Canada, Mexico, and in India. And many of his talks on Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, major Upanishads, as well as chanting of Vedic Suktas are also archived. And it has been my pleasure to know Ashwati Garu through Swami Bodhananda. And I was blessed to attend some of the sessions, the sacrificial acts, and also the chantings. And I have been part of Ashwati Garu's classes, and they are very eloquent and very elegant and very expressive and filled with a lot of practicality, philosophy filled with practicality, with eloquence. Ashwati Garu, over to you. Thank you so much. You're muted, Ashwati Garu. Ashwati Garu, you're muted. And those of you, please, who, if you are not speaking, please mute. Ashwati Garu, still muted.
Can you give me just about a minute so that I will switch to my laptop?
By all means, by all
Thank
means. And in the meantime, if anyone wants to do a couple of prarthana shlokas, please, or a 2-minute Ganesha bhajan. Shanti Garu, are you there from Dallas? And it is a custom for us at the end of this 40-minute talk to chant Hanuman Chalisa, and then we will try to conclude by 8 o'clock. And Dr. Nair and Dr. Biram.
I'll sing Ganesh Bhajan.
Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry.
Hold on. But if Dr. Biram wants to just say a few introductory words, we may take up that time for that, if you don't mind, Shanti Garu. Dr. Biram, are you there?
Dr. Raju,
Yes.
thank you for bringing such an exceptional speaker with such high caliber. And Hindu Temple of Central Texas, Omkara Mahaganapat Devasthanam, is really, and the community feels very honored and to be here, for him to be here talking to us on this important topic today. Looking forward to his speech, and we're blessed to have him here.
Yeah, you're still muted, Ashwati Garu.
Yes.
There you go.
I hope all of you can hear me. Thank you very much. I apologize. I had a little technical difficulty on my laptop, and now I hope it's all fixed and you're able to listen to it. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhetamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Pitham yasya dharitri jaladhara kalasham lingam akashamurtim nakshatram pushpamalyam grahagana kusumam chandratarar Kanetram Kukshis Sapta Samudram Bhujagiri Shikharam Saptapadalapadam Vedam Vaktram Shadangam Dashadishivadanam Divyalingam Namami. Is a beautiful prayer for Lord Shiva. In the last line, we have a mention about today's subject, Vedam Vaktram Shadangam. So Lord Shiva's mouth and the face itself is Veda, and his speech is Veda, and all his limbs are the 6 Vedangas. Thank you, Dr. Venkatraju Garu, for that very kind and generous, affectionate, loving introduction of me to the temple audience. It gives me very great pleasure to be with all of you. I do wish the circumstances were a little different, and then I would have been very delighted to be there in person. So today's subject we have chosen is Vedanga. And then if systematic study of the Veda or what the contents of the Veda are seen, then this will be a good follow-up on that. So for all of us who are adhering to the Sanatana Dharma, the Shastra gives us an instruction that we must pursue 2 important branches of knowledge, Dve Vidye Veditavye. And the 2 branches of knowledge, one is called Paravidya. This is the knowledge about Parabrahman. And the other is the collection of 10 important texts, also known as Aparavidya. The Aparavidya are the 4 branches of the Veda, Veda Shakhas, which is Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. And these terms are, I am sure, very familiar to all of you. Then the other 6, they constitute the Vedangas. And the Vedangas are Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirukta, Chandas, and Jyotisha. So we will have a brief idea about what these Vedangas are. In fact, I would be extremely delighted if any of you in the audience have specialized and learned any of these Vedangas in a systematic manner. And those of you who desire to learn these Vedangas in a systematic manner, many sources are available, and then I would be happy to point those of you who are interested to some of those sources. So today's talk is more of an introductory nature, and this will benefit any of you who have had not much of an idea about the Vedanga. And therefore, let us start with, first of all, what is the definition of Anga? The Sanskrit word Anga means limb or a part. So as soon as we say that something is a part, then that part should belong to another entity called the Angi. So the Sanskrit word Angi means one who has the parts, and Anga is those parts. So in the context of the Vedic corpus, Veda Anga, that is the parts that embellish the meaning of the Vedas, are codified in these Vedangas. So it is important that we use the Veda mantra clearly understanding what they mean. In fact, the Rigveda itself says, Rucho akshare parame vyoman. It is said that the Vedic word, Rik means the Vedic word, Akshara means a letter. The Rucho Akshare Parame Vyoman it is considered as extraordinary, but he who does not know the meaning of the Veda, Kim Rucha Karishyati, what can this Veda do? How can it help? If we simply chant the Vedas or even listen to the Vedas without knowing its meaning, then the real purpose of the Vedic chanting is lost. Of course, some benefit is always there. My popular metaphor is, if I have got headache and the doctor says take a Tylenol, I do not need to know the pharmacology of Tylenol. My headache does go away. Similarly, Veda mantra, when used properly, it does have its effect and it does give us what we desire for. But knowing the meaning of the Veda and knowing which mantra has to be used for which purpose actually makes this benefit much more effective. So in the jnana of the Veda, that is to know the meaning of the Veda, the Vedangas are of very, very critical importance. Whether it is to understand the jnana part of the Veda, which is usually addressed in the Upanishads, not that it is not there in the main Samhita part also, but Upanishads focus on the jnana about Parabrahman, about Atman, etc. But there is also the karma kanda, which we do on our daily basis, both at home as well as in the temples. So jnana kanda and karma kanda, for both of them to be properly understood, Vedanga knowledge is very, very essential. So there is a metaphor that Veda is actually considered as a sentient being, Purusha. In fact, the Lord is called Parama Purusha, and this Parama Purusha also has 6 very important limbs. And these limbs are Shiksha. First of the Vedanga is Shiksha, and Shiksha Sastra addresses pronunciation and intonation. So because all our pronunciations are through our voice box and it is considered to flow through our prana, and that is through the nose, and therefore Shiksha Sastra is the nose of this Veda Purusha. Limb number 1. Then it is not enough if we just pronounce and chant the Veda. They must also be applied in the various rituals, yajna, yaga, puja, etc. Samskaras like namakarana, vivaha, and therefore ritualistic procedures have to be established, have been established by our sages, and this is called as kalpa. And since we do things with our hands, kalpa is mapped onto our arms and the hands. Then we articulate through our mouth, and what we speak has to be grammatical. In fact, a whole subject matter of how one should speak is codified in the beautiful Vak Sukta of the Rigveda. So we'll come in due course to study some of the suktas also. So this Vyakarana is the mouth of the Veda Purusha. Vyakarana is grammar. And then we have to move from ignorance to knowledge, from immortality to immortality. As the Upanishads talk about it, asatoma asatgamaya, gama, gamaya, gama means to move. So for the sake of movement, we do need feet. And therefore the Veda Purusha's feet is called Chandas or meter. Then it is very important that We also know the right timing of when we do these rituals. So astronomy and astrology form the eyes of the Veda Purusha. And finally, the ears through which we hear the words and understand its meaning is etymology or nirukta. Thus, we have 6 angas: Shiksha, which is the nose of the Veda Purusha; Kalpa, ritualistic procedures are the arms; and then Vyakarana or grammar, which is the mouth of the Veda Purusha; and Chandas or meter, feet; and Jyotisha, astronomy and astrology, the eyes; and Nirukta or etymology are the ears. So very briefly, what are these 6? Shiksha. So first and foremost, Veda mantras have to be uttered very, very clearly and in a way that the meaning becomes evident. In fact, in the ancient times, when Vedic language itself was the language of the people, when properly uttered using the Shiksha Sastra, the entire assembly knew what was meant. Unfortunately, as time has progressed, we have generally lost the knowledge of the Veda mantras and their meaning unless somebody has specialized in it. So, Shiksha Shastra addresses how we should actually utter letters, sounds, and the duration of those utterances. And this in Sanskrit is called Swara, Varna, and Matra. So Shiksha Sastra studies how each letter has to be pronounced, what should be the intonation, and what should be the emphasis and the duration to be given to each one of the letters and the words and the sentences. Very, very critical. And you would have noticed that when those who chant the Vedas in perfect accordance to Shiksha Sastra, when you listen, just like as you were when you listen to good music, you are mesmerized by the beauty, the lilting quality of music. Similarly, when somebody chants the Veda according to the Shiksha Sastra, it is the most melodious thing to hear. Whereas, on the contrary, we also see in many assemblies, I have seen this in many, many temples, not only here in the US, but also in different countries, including India, where even in the congregation, some of the people are chanting the mantras. And really, I'm sure many of you also have felt it. It is purely, there is a lot of cacophony. And then really you're not enjoying it. It looks like a very noisy crowd who are chanting. In fact, I had one of my student who had learned the Rudra, and he would chant in such a fast pace that nobody could catch up with him. Then I would usually tease him and say that you are going too fast. I'm going to issue you a speeding ticket. So we will see that in the Shiksha Shastra, it's very important to maintain the every single syllable has to be pronounced exactly as it was designed by the original sages. The second is Kalpa. So what is the purpose of the Veda? The purpose of the Veda is Anushtanam. So in Sanskrit, we have a term Anushtana. Anushtana means according to the properly established methodology, one should follow the yajna, yaga, and the puja as part of one's sadhana. So therefore, kalpa is defined as kalpyate samarthyate yaga prayogaha iti is a technical definition. That means when a yajna is performed perfectly, then what happens is that perfection will make sure that the object of the yajna is actually met. Then the third of the Vedanga is Vyakarana. Vyakarana gives us a knowledge of the form of the word called Padaswarupa. And by knowing the form and structure of the word Padaswarupa, we can determine the meaning of the word called Artha Nishchaya. So I'm introducing many of these technical terms for your familiarity with these Shastras. Then this grammar or Vyakarana is extremely essential for the perception and a meaningful communication. An understanding of Vyakarana is needed. Then the fourth important Vedanga is Chandas. Now this Chandas is actually another term used for the Veda itself. So you can imagine how important is this Vedanga. In Chandas, we must actually, we are taught to pronounce properly, rhythmically. And to pronounce properly and rhythmically, we do need the Chandas. So when we study the Chandas part of the Vedanga, we will see more in detail what Chandas are used in the Veda and why a particular mantra is set into a particular meter. In fact, it satisfies all the purposes of the yajna, perfection of the yajna, the correct way in which the divine forces are invoked. For that, an appropriate chandas is used. So when we address the Chandas Shastra, we will see more. Then the fifth of the Anga is if we want to do anything efficiently, timeliness and timing are also very critical. This Shastra, called the Jyotisha Sastra, determines the correct time of performing the yajna, yaga, and the puja. Of course, a lot of Jyotisha has been used more as a predictive astrology or more to when people, what we call as Prashna Shastra. So people go and ask, I'm going through this hardship, this difficulty, what can we do? But that's only a very small part of Jyotisha. And then we have finally the crowning Vedanga called Nirukta, the most critical of it. And this Shastra provides etymology and it helps in our meditating upon the meaning of the Vedic word. Friends, but for these Vedangas, our culture, the Vedic culture, could not have sustained at all. And the benefit of the Veda would have been lost. And then we would have completely lost a great way of communication. If any of you in the assembly are management experts, you can see that all these 6 qualities are required for an effective manager and for an effective businessman. So today, we'll get acquainted with the first of the Vedangas, the Shiksha Sastra. So this Vedanga is called the nose of the Veda Purusha. The definition of Shiksha Sastra is termed in Sanskrit itself as Shiksha Ghranam tu Vedasya. Shiksha is the nose of the Veda. So what does this Shastra do? It actually instructs us to utter a letter, a word, and a sentence in perfect pronunciation of each one of them. Swara. Swara are the vowels. Then you have the consonants Varna. And then you have the pronunciation called Ucharana. Then Ucharana methodology, wherever all these things are taught, it is called as Shiksha. So what I said in English is in a sutra form, in an aphoristic form, Swara, Varna, Adi, Ucharana, Prakaro, Yatra Shikshyate, Upadishyate, Sa Shiksha. So this is the method of teaching, of perfection. And I'm sure all of you have heard that Veda is called Shruti. So the only way such perfection in pronunciation can be achieved is by means of Shruti or hearing, listening. Listen to this teacher very carefully and repeating it in the presence of the teacher. So Veda learning is in-person learning. Lot of people I know learn the Vedic chanting by listening to YouTube or such recordings, but unfortunately, they don't have the benefit of a teacher to correct how they pronounce. Here, I would like to share my personal experience with learning of the Veda. Immediately after my Upanayana, when I was around 12, 13 years old, in our home in Bangalore, just about 100 yards is the Bangalore Sanskrit College, which was founded by the Maharaja of Mysore. And in fact, my great-grandfather was actually brought to Bangalore so that he can be one of the professors in the Sanskrit College. And I was sent to my teacher as Rajagaru read out. My guru was the Ganapati, an extraordinary scholar by name Ananta Krishna Ganapati. So it was one-to-one. And I also had to pursue my academic studies. So the classes met at 5:30 in the morning. Imagine a 12-year-old boy being woken up early in the morning. You have to take a bath, and then only a dhoti and the angavastram, because we are not allowed to wear anything on that, like a shirt or an undershirt. And then we have to walk barefoot these 200 yards to go to the class every day at 5:30. And no books. We are not allowed to carry the text. So I sit with the teacher. And the class starts on a Dvitiya. So here is where Jyotisha comes. It is always starts on the second day of our Vedic fortnight. So from Dvitiya to the day of the Pradosha, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Pradosha because you do the Shiva Archana on Pradosha days. Up to the Pradosha day, the class will be taught one section of the Veda. The teacher utters, and I have to repeat twice the same mantra every single day for these 12 days. The rest of the days, that is probably the Trayodasi or Chaturdasi, Purnima, Ranama, Amavasya, and Pratama, they are called Anadhyana days. That is when no new text is taught. And those are the 3 days we were supposed to completely and correctly memorize what we have learned in the last 14 days. Then we reassemble on the following Dvitiya day, and I have to chant the entire section before my guru, even if I made one single swara error. Then this lesson repeats for the next 14 days. So you can imagine if it has happened to me in this day and age, how precise the teaching was even 100 years ago. If it was not for the Shiksha Sastra and the Shiksha discipline, we would have lost the Vedas and the method of chanting. It would have been impossible for us to be proud that UNESCO has recognized Vedic chanting as a human world heritage. So this has been possible only because of Shiksha Sastra. In fact, my guru used to say, when he was a boy and learning, if he made an error, then he would actually get a nice slap. But by the time I went to school, that corporeal punishment had given up. But the discipline continued. So how are we learning? Take, for example, Yajurveda. So let us say, Om Sahana Bhavatu. This is a mantra from the Yajurveda. We are supposed to repeat it twice. Then suppose if there was a mantra of the Rigveda. Say, for example, Agnimi Purohitam. We are supposed to repeat it thrice. So imagine you repeat a mantra thrice in the presence of the Guru, who is very carefully listening to you, and you do this for 14 days, you'll never forget this in the rest of your life. And the same discipline is used in transmitting to your students also. And thus, Shiksha has been considered as the very prana or the life force of the Veda. So this should become evident to you. Unless this rigorous methodology of teaching was not there, Veda would have lost its prana and died. And the only way it would have probably been preserved is somebody reads it like a prose, and then they go to a dictionary, and then they will translate in whatever manner they want. And this is a great disservice also has been done by many, many non-traditional Vedic scholars in wrongly interpreting or misinterpreting or inadequately interpreting the Vedic word, because Shiksha Sastra was not followed. So how do we make sure this breadth is perfectly maintained? For that, the Shiksha Sastra says paribana, or the duration of the pronunciation, what it makes in the chanting is the swara, which is the vowels, and the varna, which are the consonants, combination thereof, it gives us akshara shuddhi. Akshara shuddhi means purity of the pronunciation of a letter, purity of the syllable. So here, in many of my students, please, Telugu background people, please forgive me, because I had to correct a lot of my Telugu students in the Veda. In the Telugu speaking, there is a accepted way of interchanging artha as ardha. So, naku ardham kaledu, suppose you use in the Telugu word, then the listener has no confusion. He will say that he did not understand. But if you take Sanskrit, artha means meaning, ardha means half. So completely the meaning is lost. So I am also a Telugu person, so I can actually comment. So if we try to use the training of our mother tongue in the pronunciation of the Vedic word, then we would be making many, many errors. So again, please note that Vedic words, letters should be pronounced as Vedic letters and words. We should not transfer our training of another language into that. This you will also see in many of the Hindi belt people also trying to chant the Veda. Because of the lack of Shiksha Sastra, sometimes we hear wrong pronunciation. So in addition to the duration or the parimana, we also have to maintain the pitch. And this pitch will come as high, low, and middle. For example, Sahana Vavatu. So Sa, it goes low. Sahana, Na goes higher. Vavatu, there is no swara for that. Only when we chant this way, the sentence would mean, may the Lord protect both of us. Saha na bhavatu. So these are called as Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita. So again, an emphasis on how we pronounce. If the pitch of the letters are in proper places, then what happens? We display tonal purity. And it is called as Swara Shuddhi. So earlier we saw Akshara Shuddhi, and now we are seeing Swara Shuddhi. So when we chant a mantra with Akshara Shuddhi and Swara Shuddhi, the Shiksha Sastra says it gives us Ishtartha Siddhi. Ishtartha Siddhi means what we desire will be exactly got by us. So a question is always asked, we do so many pujas, we do yajna, we do sankalpa, that is we ask for this particular thing, give me children, give me promotion, give me money, take away my sickness, all these prayers we do, but it is not successful. So many people ask then, oh, all these Vedic rituals is all a waste, because it's only a waste of resources, waste of time. It is only some of the priests who are interested in making some money out of me are actually recommending all these things. Please note that is not so. It is because of the lack of the shiksha, the proper pronunciation. That is why a puja or a yajna fails. There is a beautiful Vedic story to illustrate this. There was one Rakshasa, his name was Tvashta. This Tvashta's father was actually killed by Indra. And Tvashta was very, very upset that his father was a Rakshasa, and Devasura Yuddha took place. And in that war, Indra killed Tvashta's father. So Tvashta calls on his guru, Shukracharya, and asks him, "Sir, can you please design a yajna so that I can get a son who can kill Indra?" And remember that he is a great Rishi, Shukracharya. So he creates a yajna, and in that yajna, he teaches him Tavendra Shatrur Vardhasva. Indra Shatrur Vardhasva was the mantra given. That means give me a ability to slay Indra. But when the yajna was done, the swara shifted. Indra Shatrur Vardhasva. Same word, same sentence. What it meant was, may Indra destroy the son I am going to beget. And this is true even in our everyday conversation, isn't it? Suppose I say, he is a good man. How many ways we can use that sentence? The same sentence, he is a good man, because of tonal inflection, can be made to mean the very opposite. And that is why many yajnas fail, many pujas fail. So it is very essential for us to choose the right kind of priest who has a good mastery over Shiksha Sastra. And when such a person does, along with the devotion of the performer, there is no doubt yajna and yaga actually yield the desired fruits. So therefore, Panini Maharshi gives us a metaphor as to how the Vedic word should be uttered according to Shiksha Sastra. You would have seen, just as a cat which has got a litter, it picks up its young in its mouth and it holds it tight enough so the cub doesn't fall off, and it doesn't actually hurt the cub. Vyagri yatha haret putran damshtrabhyam cha na pidayet. It does not hurt with its fangs. Similarly, swara and the varna have to be chanted. To summarize what is the perfect way of chanting, it should not be too loud, nor it should be too feeble. You would also seen in assemblies where a person with a good voice will be shouting at the top of his voice, almost giving a jarring effect. So Shruti of the assembly also has to be maintained. Everybody must chant with the same Shruti. This you will see when professional, well-trained priests in the method I mentioned from Guru Mukhena, from Guru, their chanting you must see, it will be perfect synchronization and very, very melodious. And the sounds should not be blurred. Many times we see that they start the mantra and Namaste Rudra Manyava Uto Dayave Nama. It trails off. So the whole sentence has got to be chanted at the same pitch, and sound should not fade out or slip away. They should not be barked. There are some people who just bark all the mantras, and it should not be casual or loosely chanted. And the duration of these mantras called matra bala also have to be preserved. And this matra bala is wherever it is a short sound called hrasva, it must be hrasva. Wherever it is a longer sound called dirgha, it must be dirgha. So in short, Veda should be learned very, very carefully, listening to the Guru by proper repetition, and then the exact way, according to the branch of the Veda, how it should be chanted. When we do that, Shiksha Sastra ensures that our chanting, prayer, sadhana, meditation, and yajna and yaga becomes successful. So we see that when we chant the Shanti mantra, there also people you would have heard chant very differently. So if it is Shukla Yajurveda, one branch of the Yajurveda, it must be chanted as Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The emphasis is on the first Sha. Whereas in the other Vedas, it is Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So depending on which Veda you are chanting, even those nuances have to be observed. And therefore, the Shanti mantra, for example, when we use the Purnamadaha Shanti mantra, it is from the Shukla Yajurveda. The Shanti mantra has to be Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Suppose you do Sahanavavatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So that's Shiksha Sastra gives us the discipline of perfect communication. So in the next, when we meet, we will look at the next Vedanga, the Kalpa. And with this, I request that I conclude my presentation with this Shanti mantra. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevava Shishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you all. Rajagaru, dear friends, thank you for asking me to speak a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Beeram. Please stay on, all of you, please. We have this tradition of chanting Hanuman Chalisa. Then after that, we'll entertain few questions. Dr. Beeram.
Yes, Dr. Raju. We'll go ahead and get started with Hanuman Chalisa. Jyoti, do you mind chanting?
Yes. जय हनुमान ज्ञान गुण सागर जय कपीसति लोक उजागर रामदूत तुलित बल धामा अंजनी पुत्र पवन सुत नामा महावीर विक्रम भजरंगी कुमति निवार सुमति के संगी कंचन वरन विराज सुबेसा कानन कुंडल कुंचित केसा हाथ वज्र और ध्वजा विराजे कांधे मूंज नेवो साजे शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन तेज प्रताप महाजगवंदन विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर राम काज करिबे को आतुर प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबे को रसिया राम लखन सीता मन बसिया सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सियहि दिखावा विकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे रामचंद्र के काज संवारे लाए सजीवन लखन जियाए श्री रघुवीर हरषि उर लाए रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बड़ाई तुम मम प्रिय भरत ही सम भाई सहस बदन तुम रोयस गावे अस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा नारद सारद सहित अहिसा यम कुबेर दिगपाल जहाते कवि कोविद कहि सके हाते तुम उपकार सुग्रीवहि कीन्हा राम मिलाए राजपद दीना तुमरो मंत्र विभीषण माना लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना युग सहस्र योजन पर भानु लील्योताहि मधुर फल जानु प्रभु मुद्रिका मेलि मुख माहि जलधि लांघि गए अचरज नाही दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते सुगम अनुग्रह तुमरे तेते राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे होत न आज्ञा बिनु पैसारे सब सुख लहे तुम्हारी सरना तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना आपन तेज सम्हारो आपे तीनों लोक हांकते कापे भूत पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे महावीर जब नाम सुनावे नासे रोग हरे सब पीरा जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीरा संकट से हनुमान छुड़ावे मन क्रम बचन ध्यान जो लावे सब पर राम तपस्वी राजा तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा और मनोरथ जो कोई लावे सोई अमित जीवन फल पावे चारों युग परताप तुम्हारा है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा साधु संत के तुम रखवारे असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे अष्ट सिद्धि नवनिधि के दाता असबर दीन जानकी माता राम रसायन तुमरे पासा सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा तुमरे भजन राम को पावे जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे अंत काल रघुवरपुर जाई जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई और देवता चित्त चित्त न धरई, हनुमत से ये सर्व सुख करई, संकट कटे मिटे सब पीरा, जो सुमिरे हनुमत बलबीरा। जय 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 हनुमान गोसाई, कृपा करहु गुरुदेव की नाई, जो सत बार पाठ कर कोई, छूटहि बंधि महासुख होई, जो यह पढ़े हनुमान चालीसा, होय सिद्धि साकी गौरीसा। तुलसीदास सदा हरि चेरा, की जय नाथ हृदय महडेरा। पवन तनया संकट हरना, मंगल मूर्ति रूप, राम लखन सीता सहित, हृदय बसहु सुरभूप। Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Sir, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us and educating us on fundamentals of scriptures and basics of those. I think I'll open up the forum for questions. We have a few minutes. Anyone, comments, questions?
Thank you so much, sir. It was a very enlightening talk. I really enjoyed it. So I have a question regarding the pronunciation while chanting, but I'm jumping ahead a little bit because it's more a question on the Chandas. I always wondered how to pronounce the Visargas. So to give an example, when we chant in Anushtup Chanda, which has a certain meter, such as Yatra Yogeshwara Krishnaha. When we say Krishnaha, it introduces an extra syllable, which in my mind, it appears that we are exceeding the limit of the measure in the Chanda. So how to pronounce it correctly, sir? Thank you.
There we are following the classical Paninian grammar. So the Sandhi rules, there are slight variations in classical grammar and Vedic grammar, but not much. For example, in the example you quoted, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhotir Dhruvane Tirmatir Mama. So this is when this is called as a Subanta. When the Visarga comes, the Subanta rules will apply, and therefore the classical Sanskrit Vyakarana rules apply. But there are also pretty much not too much of deviation in Vedic grammar, but some deviations are there. For example, Bhadrang Karne Bhishrunayama, that sound should come. So there again, the difference between the classical Sanskrit, in classical Sanskrit, there is a little bit of a freedom in pronunciation, whereas because the swara is given a little less importance than in the Vedic world. So that is why there's a whole different Vedic grammar itself. And therefore, in the Vedic chanting, we follow the Vedic grammar, whereas it's a Smriti, Bhagavad Gita is a Smriti, Shruti, Veda is Shruti, and Itihasa, Purana, they're all Smriti. In Smriti, classical Sanskrit grammar will apply.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Of course, Chandas, when we get to the section of Chandas, I will talk about the Vedic Chandas.
Dr. Dhani Reddy?
Shri Ashwat Garu, I feel like such an ignorant person even to ask you a question. What advice you have for people people like us who have an interest and want to understand the great message that our Vedas want to convey?
Mm-hmm.
Because Vedas, I believe, is for all humanity. But if they're only limited to a few people who can pronounce it correctly and understand the meaning correctly, what advice you have for people like us who don't even know Sanskrit, let alone how to pronounce it?
Which I
So please help us.
It's a wonderful, excellent question. But with our technology, it is very easily solved. So one of the classes I teach on Sunday mornings, this whole group, about 40, 45 people, they are all based in the Bay Area. So they join me every Sunday morning, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which is 8 o'clock for them. And then on Zoom, we actually chant, I teach them the chanting of the mantra. And then I send them a recording in my voice of each one of the sentences. And they in turn listen to the recording, practice, and they send back their recording. And I listen to their recording, and then I fine tune their chanting. So again, this is the best we can do when immediate direct access to a physical teacher is not available. So it is possible to do that. Only thing is that again, somebody who is teaching must take the time, and somebody who is learning also must take the time. And how much should we know? We don't have to know the entire all the 4 Vedas. You can even just get the sampling of the Vedas. And once you have mastered 1 or 2 suktas, I would probably say 5 or 6 of the suktas, intuitively you get an idea of how a mantra has to be chanted. So I would suggest very practically to learn from a teacher at least 1 or 2 suktas, like say, for example, the Purusha Sukta. Or if you are following the Rigveda, you can learn the Ganesha Sukta or Ganapati Atharva Shirsha from the Atharva Veda. So one sample from each one of these Vedas. So you can see the difference in the nuances of pronunciation, and then master them. Then you will be able to having a text chanted perfectly, because it's a very systematized and systematic discipline. It is made to be learned very easily. Only thing is that at some point of time in our history, maybe for about 200-300 years, this became inaccessible because a particular group of people did not share it with everybody. Whereas the Veda itself says that this is a universal knowledge. In the Rigveda, there is a mantra which says as soon as a person completes the Vedic study, you go and teach your women in your house and all the servants in your house. Aryaya Charanaya cha. So that universal vision is there in the Vedic vision. And that fortunately, because of technology, we can get it back. So to answer your question, if you were to learn even 1 or 2 suktas, by investing the time and then perfecting each sentence and each of the swara and the varna, you will be able to get it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're little after 8. Raju, do you have any closing comment?
Yes, Dr. Biram, after you have asked me to find a teacher who can teach us about 3 acharyas, 3 approaches, Dvaita, Advaita, Visishta Advaita, 6 matas, 6 limbs, and the 4 aspects of our paths, karma, bhakti, jnana, and to talk about all these, the 6 aspects of the Vedanga. I had no other person than Ashwath Garu to ask, to beg, and to actually come and then teach us. So I'm praying that the COVID will go away, but the discipline which COVID taught us will stay, so that more of us can have the opportunity to listen to Ashwath Garu once a month, 3rd Thursday of the month. And we are so fortunate. And thank you, Dr. Biram Garu. You actually just inspired and initiated. And thank you, Ashwath Garu, and all the audience. This is recorded. And we'll send it to those who could not attend it today. Thank you.
Again,
Shubharatri.
thank you, sir, on behalf of Hindu Temple of Central Texas, in Temple, Texas. Thank you.
Shubharatri. Shubharatri.
Shubharatri.
Namaskara.
Namaskara.
Thank you.
Shubharatri.
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Namaskara.
Shubharatri. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashwath Garu.
Just that no video attendance, I must they control.